The problem with control. What's the problem with using methods like these to try control your thoughts and feelings? The answer is nothing if you use them only in moderation. You use them only in situations where they can work. Using them doesn't stop you from doing the things you value. If you're not too distressed or upset, if you're just dealing with run-of-the-mill, everyday stress, then deliberate attempts to control your thoughts and feelings are unlikely to be a problem. In some situations, distraction can be a good way of dealing with unpleasant emotions. If you've just had a fight with your partner and you're feeling hurt and angry, it could be helpful to distract yourself by going for a walk or burying your head in a book until you calm down. And sometimes zoning out can be beneficial. For example, if you're distressed and drained after a grueling day's work, falling asleep on the couch may be just a ticket to help you rejuvenate. However, control methods become problematic when you use them excessively. You use them in situations where they can't work. Using them stops you from doing the things you truly value. Using control excessively. To varying degrees, every one of us uses control strategies to get rid of or avoid difficult feelings. In moderation, this is no big deal. For instance, when I'm feeling particularly anxious, I sometimes eat a bar of chocolate. This is basically a form of distraction, an attempt to avoid some unpleasant feeling by focusing on something else. But because I only do this in moderation, it's not a major problem in my life. I maintain a healthy weight and I don't give myself diabetes. However, back in my early 20s, it was a different story. Back then, I ate a truckload of cookies and chocolate to try to avoid my anxiety. On a bad day, I could go through 5-sized family packages of chocolate chips. As a result, I became seriously overweight and developed high blood pressure. Thus, when used excessively, this control strategy had serious consequences. If you are worried about upcoming exams, you may try to distract yourself from the anxiety by watching television. Now, that's fine if you're doing it every now and then, but if you do it too much, you'll spend all your evenings watching television and you won't get any studying done. This, in turn, will create more anxiety as your studies lag further and further behind. Therefore, as a method for anxiety control, distraction simply can't work in the long run. And then there's the obvious. Dealing with your anxiety in this way prevents you from doing the one thing that would be genuinely helpful: studying. The same goes for zoning out with alcohol or drugs. Moderate drinking or taking the occasional tranquilizer isn't likely to have serious long-term consequences. But if such control methods become a crutch, it can easily lead to addiction, which then creates all sorts of complications, giving rise to even more painful feelings. Trying to control situations where it can't work. If you love somebody deeply and you lose that relationship, whether through death, rejection, or separation, you will feel pain. That pain is called grief. Grief is a normal emotional reaction to any significant loss, whether a loved one, a job, or a limb. And once that pain is accepted, it will pass in its own good time. Unfortunately, many of us refuse to accept grief. We will do anything rather than feel it. We may bury ourselves in work, drink heavily, throw ourselves into a new relationship on the rebound, or numb ourselves with prescribed medications. But no matter how hard we try to push grief away, deep down inside, it's still there, and eventually it will be back. It's like holding a ball under the water. As long as you keep holding it down, it stays beneath the surface, but eventually your arm gets tired, and the moment you release your grip, the ball leads straight up out of the water. Donna was a 25-year-old when her husband and child died in a tragic car crash. Naturally, she felt an explosion of sadness, fear, loneliness, and despair, but Donna could not accept those painful feelings, and she turned to alcohol to push them away. Getting drunk would temporarily soothe her pain, but once she sobered up, her grief returned with a vengeance, and then she'd drink even more to push it away again. By the time Donna came to see me 6 months later, she was knocking back 2 bottles of wine a day, as well as taking Valium and sleeping tablets. The single biggest factor in her recovery was her willingness to stop running away from her pain. Only when she opened herself to her feelings and accepted them as a natural part of the grieving process was she able to come to terms with her terrible loss. This enabled her to grieve effectively for her loved ones and channel her energy into building a new life. Later in the book, we'll look at how she accomplished that. When using control stops us from doing what we value. What do you cherish most in life? Health, work, family, friends, religion, sports, nature? It's no surprise that life is richer and more fulfilling when we actively invest our time and energy in the things that are most important or meaningful to us. Yet, all too often, our attempts to avoid unpleasant feelings get in the way of doing what we truly value. For example, suppose you are a professional actor and you love your work. Then one day, quite out of the blue, you develop an intense fear of failure just as you are due to appear on stage. So you refuse to go on, a problem commonly known as stage fright. Refusing to go on stage may well reduce your fear temporarily, but it also stops you from doing something you truly value. Or suppose you've just gone through a divorce. Sadness, fear, and anger are all natural reactions, but you don't want to have these unpleasant feelings. So you try to lift your mood by eating junk food, getting drunk, or chain smoking cigarettes. But what does this do to your health? I've never met anyone who didn't value their health, and yet many people use control strategies that actively damage their physical bodies. How much control do we actually have? The degree of control we have over our thoughts and feelings depends largely on how intense they are and what situation we are in. The less intense the feelings and the less stressful the situation, the more control we have. For instance, if we're dealing with the typical everyday stress and we're in a safe, comfortable environment such as our bedroom or a yoga class or the office of a couch or therapist, then a simple relaxation technique can make us feel calmer right away. However, the more intense our thoughts and feelings are and the more stressful the environment we are in, the less effectively our attempts at control will be. Just try feeling totally relaxed when you're going for an interview or arguing with your partner or asking someone out on a date, and you'll soon see what I mean. While you can act calmly in those situations, you will not feel relaxed no matter how hard you practice your relaxation techniques. We also have more control over our thoughts and feelings when the things that we're avoiding aren't too important. For example, if you're avoiding cleaning your messy garage or your car, then it's probably fairly easy to take your mind off it. Why? Because it's simply not that important. If you don't do it, the sun will still rise tomorrow and you will continue to draw breath. All that will happen is that your garage or car will remain messy. But suppose you suddenly developed a large, suspicious-looking black mole on your arm and you avoid going to the doctor. Would it be easy to take your mind off it? Sure, you could go to a movie, watch television, or surf the internet, and maybe, for a while, you could stop thinking about it, but in the long term, you will inevitably start thinking about that more because the consequences of not taking action are potentially serious. So because many of the things we avoid are not that important, and because many of our negative thoughts and feelings are not that intense, we find that our control strategies can often make us feel better, at least for a little while. Unfortunately though, this leads us to believe that we have much more control than we actually do, and this false sense of control is only compounded by the myths we encountered in the last chapter.